Hey everyone, it's Kelly. Welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be cooking up a few comforting crockpot meals as well as a yummy fall dessert. Between homeschooling, basketball practices and games, and just everyday life, it can get a bit hectic, and crockpot meals are a great way to give yourself some extra time in the day so you don't have to spend an hour or two cooking dinner. Okay guys, let's get started. First up, we're going to be preparing brown sugar garlic pork chops in my 6-quart Hearth and Hand crock pot. You can find it at Target and I just love it. For this recipe, you will need pork chops. I chose boneless, but if you prefer bone-in, that's fine too. Salt and pepper. I use avocado oil, but you can also use olive oil, brown sugar, and fresh garlic. Before we throw all the ingredients in the crock pot, we're going to season the pork chops with salt and pepper and lightly brown both sides. Once those are done, we'll add them to the crock pot as well as 6 cloves of minced garlic and a half cup of brown sugar. I then use a spatula to mix those together to evenly coat the pork chops and set the crock pot on high for 6 hours. These were fully cooked after about 5 hours. They were so tender and juicy and the flavor was amazing. I haven't had a pork chop in years because, to be honest, they just aren't my favorite, but I wanted to give these a try and I'm so glad I did. I will definitely be making these again. I had a few red potatoes in the fridge, so I decided to whip up my garlic parmesan mashed potatoes to serve with the pork chops, and the combination was perfection. Here we will be making Mississippi pot roast. I don't know why it took me so long to make this, but wow, this was a favorite. For this, you'll need 2 to 3 pounds of beef. I used flank steak, salt and pepper, butter, ranch seasoning, minced onion flakes, au jus seasoning, and whole pepperoncinis. Just as we did with the pork chops, we'll also be seasoning the beef with salt and pepper and browning both sides. Once we add it to the crock pot, we'll top it with onion flakes. The recipe says 1 tablespoon, but I always add more of everything because I prefer a lot of flavor. I then added about 3 tablespoons of ranch seasoning, the packet of au jus, 6 tablespoons of butter, and I added 10 pepperoncinis for extra spice. Once everything is in, we'll set the crock pot on low for 8 hours. After the full 8 hours, I just shredded the meat right there in the pot and then served it over some brown rice. I know some prefer to serve it with mashed potatoes or vegetables or eat it on a bun. Either way, you can't go wrong. This was delicious and would be great for a barbecue or a game day party. Like I said before, I don't know why I waited so long to make this. It's that good. Next up is Cajun chicken Alfredo. For this dish, you will need andouille sausage, boneless, skinless chicken, salt and pepper, garlic powder, Cajun seasoning, heavy cream, chicken broth, penne pasta, fresh garlic, butter, and Parmesan cheese. First, we'll add the chicken to a pan on medium-high heat, then season the chicken with salt, pepper, and garlic powder and lightly brown both sides. Browning the meat is totally optional on all of these recipes, but doing so does hold in all the juices and adds more flavor to every dish. Next, we'll add the brown chicken to the crock pot, then cut up the andouille sausage in 1-inch pieces and add those to the pot as well. We'll then add 3 cups of heavy cream, 4 cups of chicken broth, 4 tablespoons of butter, 3 tablespoons of Cajun seasoning, and 4 cloves of crushed garlic. Like I said, I use more of whatever the recipe tells me. I like a ton of flavor, so that's up to you. Add a bit of salt and pepper, give it a mix, and it's ready to cook on high for 4 hours. After cooking for about 3.5 hours, I removed the chicken and set it aside to slice up. I then added a half cup of hot water and the penne pasta. The amount I poured in was 2 boxes of the Banza chickpea pasta. You can find it at Target. And then you'll just let that cook for another 30 minutes. Once the pasta is tender, you'll stir in 2.5 cups of Parmesan cheese, the sliced chicken, and additional salt and pepper to taste. Give it a good mix, and there you have it. This dish is such a good comfort meal. It has great flavor and the perfect amount of spice. Next, we'll be making my mom's beef stew. This is her recipe. I usually make this in a Dutch oven, but I wanted to experiment making it in the crock pot, so that's what we're going to do today. You're going to need cubed stew meat, fresh garlic, green beans, celery, carrots, yellow onions, tomato paste, beef bouillon cubes, beef broth, olive oil, dried parsley, dried thyme, a bay leaf, salt and pepper, and a few red or russet potatoes. This recipe also calls for red wine, which I did not have but decided to make it anyway, and then also Worcestershire sauce, which I will add in later. First, we'll cut up all the vegetables. I like to give everything a rough chop. I personally like bigger chunks of vegetables in my stews. As I'm preparing those, I like to dump all of the veggies in a bowl on the side and keep everything together. It just makes it easier to add to the crock pot. Okay, now I have to say, I have always browned the meat first before adding it to the stew, but today I chose not to. I was curious to see the difference in taste once it was finished cooking. I'll let you know my thoughts about that in a few minutes. We'll then add 2 cups of beef broth, 1 beef bouillon cube, a 6-ounce can of tomato paste, all of the veggies, 2 cloves of minced garlic, 2 tablespoons of dried parsley, a teaspoon of dried thyme, 1 bay leaf, a tablespoon of salt, a half teaspoon of pepper. Then we're going to mix all the ingredients together and set the crock pot on high for 6 hours. Once the stew is done cooking, we're going to need to thicken it up. So I'm mixing 2 tablespoons of water and 1 tablespoon of cornstarch together. You could also use flour. And then we're going to stir that right into the stew while adding additional salt and pepper to taste. To be honest, it didn't taste much different when comparing it to making it in the Dutch oven, but I would definitely brown the meat next time and add the red wine for that extra punch of flavor. Overall, though, it is still one of my favorite meals to eat, especially during the colder months. Here's one of my new favorites, white chicken chili. This was so good. For this recipe, you'll need boneless, skinless chicken, 1 yellow onion. I'm using frozen roasted corn, salt, pepper, cayenne pepper, oregano, cumin, chili powder, fresh garlic, great northern beans. I'm also using pinto beans, roasted green chilies, chicken broth, Monterey Jack cheese, sharp cheddar cheese, plain Greek yogurt or sour cream, half and half cream cheese, and to garnish we have cilantro, jalapenos, and avocado, which I didn't end up using because they weren't ripe enough yet. And finally, fall leaf tortilla chips that I picked up from Trader Joe's. They have the best specialty items year round for every season. To start, we're going to place the chicken in the crock pot, adding all the seasonings on top: 1 teaspoon of salt, a half a teaspoon of black pepper, 1 teaspoon of cumin, which is clearly not enough. We add a lot more flavor later on, but right now I'm just following the recipe. A half a teaspoon of chili powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Then we're going to dice up an onion and add that over top of the seasonings. Then comes 2 cloves of minced garlic, both cans of beans, make sure to drain and rinse both, 2 cans of chilies, the entire bag or can of corn, whichever you have, 3 cups of chicken broth, and a handful of fresh chopped cilantro. Be sure to mix everything together and set your crock pot on high for 4 hours. Once the chili reaches its 4-hour cook time, we'll take the chicken out to shred it up and then add it back in the crock pot immediately after. Then we'll add the softened cream cheese, just a half cup, I'm mixing a bit of the broth in with it to ensure a smooth blend of the cream cheese. Once we have it nice and creamy, we'll add it right into the chili, stir it a bit, and then add a quarter cup of half and half, stirring that in as well. After giving it about 15 minutes to thicken up, I gave it a taste test and decided it needed way more flavor. So I went ahead and used my judgment to add in a good amount of each seasoning to the chili, and the blend was perfect. I gave it a few more minutes to thicken and let all the spices marinate together. While that was finishing up, I prepared the toppings, slicing up a jalapeno, chopping up fresh cilantro, and shredding the Monterey Jack and cheddar cheese. I served the chili in this adorable pumpkin bowl I purchased, I think at Target last year, then topped it with all the fixings, including Greek yogurt and leaf tortilla chips. Oh my gosh, this was amazing. Probably the best white chicken chili I've ever had. The flavors were phenomenal. If you make any of these recipes, I highly recommend this one. And the last but not least recipe in this video is caramel apple dump cake. I've never made anything like this before. I thought the process sounded so interesting, so I had to go ahead and try it. You're going to need 5 apples. I used Honeycrisp apples, 1 lemon, salt, cinnamon, allspice. You could also use nutmeg, cornstarch, brown sugar, vanilla cake mix, caramel sauce, and butter. First, we're going to peel all the apples. Real quick, just a disclaimer, I'm not a chef. I'm pretty sure my kitchen skills are not the best. I could use some help, but I get the job done, and that's all that matters, right? If the food tastes good, then I can't be that bad. So once we're done peeling the apples, we're going to slice them up and make the apple filling on the stove. You could just go ahead and use canned apple pie filling and save yourself some time. I just prefer to make my own, but it's totally up to you. To the pot, we're going to add the sliced apples, a half cup of water, the juice from a whole lemon. We'll let those simmer for about 8 minutes or until they become soft. In the meantime, we're going to combine the brown sugar, cornstarch, cinnamon, allspice, and salt. Once the apples have softened, we'll stir in the dry mixture, making sure we coat the apples really well. Continue simmering for about another 2 minutes until the mixture is melted and bubbling. Add the apples to the crock pot along with a quarter to a half cup of caramel. I went with a half cup. I mean, why not, right? And then you're going to top all of that with the dry cake mixture, making sure it's spread evenly all the way around. And then comes a cup of melted butter. Just pour that right over top. You're going to want to place a paper towel underneath the lid to catch any extra moisture. I just draped a large piece over the top and secured it with a lid, and that's it. Set your crockpot on high for 4 hours and let the aroma of the cake fill your house because it smells like heaven. I know it looks a bit burnt around the edges, but I promise you it wasn't. It was just a little crispy. It was around 7 p.m., so the camera made everything look darker than it was. But oh my gosh, I'm not lying when I say I ate the whole thing. It took me a few days, but I ate it all. Pretty sure I gained 5 pounds. Was it worth it? Probably. This was surprisingly one of the best desserts I've ever made. The perfect dessert for the holidays. You have to try it. Okay, guys, thanks for cooking with me today. I'll link all the recipes down below. Please like and subscribe, and I'll see you on the next one.